I want to go over version 3 enhancements to the Bose SoundTouch hybrid application, just like in version 2. And the first version, I got a lot of good feedback from folks using it and some other developers on GitHub. The first thing I want to cover is a lot of people were asking for the custom URL streaming, and before I had it as a little side function over on the systems tools, and they wanted it fully integrated into the library manager. So I've now done that. So over here on the far right, you have a custom URL tab where you can put in your streams and station names and start streaming different stations. So for example, I can go like this, put in a station name, I can give it a name, and I can start streaming it. It's going on the Bose Den. You can see over here on the log, it's waking up the speaker, and it's there. So now it's playing the custom stream. Hang on. And you can see here I have a generic custom stream icon because typically there's no metadata that comes in with artwork, so I default to this stream. Now, one of the things I realized, because this again goes through Music Assistant using their custom stream function, it doesn't come down in your recents. They don't record it as a recents just like all of your other providers. So what I did is in the custom stream, I keep a history list of the things you've streamed. And from there, because it's not in your recents, you can choose to save it to your library. And then the other thing that people wanted was to have it fully integrated into your library so you can have it a favorite or assigned to a preset. So now that's possible. So what I do is if you actually played something and it's saved here, you can save it to the library, which will remove it from the history list. And it'll now show up in your library, as you can see right here. And you can then choose to just leave it there and always play something on that right from your favorites, or you can, just like we did with all the other presets, we can assign it to a global or to a specific speaker. So that's what I'm doing right now. And now you can see it's right here in my global presets. So now I'll be able to just go up to my speaker and hit preset 5, actually for any of my globals that haven't been reassigned to individual presets, and it'll start playing. So that's now been fully incorporated into the library. So that was the first thing that a lot of people wanted. Even though I don't use it, I added that. Here, let me turn this off. Let me go back here. Oh, and I did a lot of user interface cleanup, like I've enhanced this so it's a lot easier to see what's going on. Okay, other things I did to the library is I beefed up the search filtering. Before, on the search, remember in version 2, I added the global search in case you're not using the specific providers I use, and I had artists, playlists, all these things here. But now what I've done is I've also added a providers list. And what this will do is go up into Music Assistant and it'll get all the providers you've set up. So in addition to filtering, say by artist, if you're trying to get, Mozart, you could say, tag one of your specific providers, just as another way of filtering. So that's another change that I did. Also then on the library, I realized as I was starting to use it, you could end up having a lot of things in your library and they weren't sorted or filtered or anything. So now you could go in and say, I just want to see my tracks, or I just want to see by artists, or I want to see by playlist or stations. And I also filtered that by all the providers you have up in Music Assistant. However, it's doing like an outer join. So it's saying, hey, here's all your providers in your music assistant, but in your favorites right now, you only have Spotify providers. My other ones are all assigned up here. So that was another big change I made. So hopefully that'll help with sorting and filtering. Another change that I made was, and this might really be beneficial if you're submitting issues, and I'll ask you, hey, can you give me the server log? That's what's scrolling over here. But I also have it so instead of going to your server and looking at Container Station, you can actually go and see the logs real time here. You can do auto update, you can refresh them, and I even have, and I'm going to start doing this more and more going forward, I have some more verbose debug logging that helped me in the development and also in debugging. And then you could download it and it'll show it, and it'll be really easy to see what's going on, or if you need to create an issue, you can put that in the GitHub issue. So that was another change that I made. Oh, and then you can see I removed the custom URL function from over here. Another change that I did going forward, this is version 3, but going forward, we're going to have, if you can see here over on the mobile, I have it automatically checking for new versions. So from version 3 forward, if I put on a new version, then you'll get an automatic update message that you can then just dismiss, and it'll also show up over here on the logs. I don't know if you can see it, but yeah, it'll say update available. So that was because I was really wondering, well, how am I going to let people know that there's a new version, especially as I'm refining the application, which gets me to the next point. I've done a lot of background changing. I've completely gutted all of my REST API device state logic and transitioned to a WebSocket model. So now I can see real-time events as they come through on the speaker. And that's really helped a lot with stabilization. So you can see over here on the log, I have WebSocket initializing, opening the WebSockets right here. So that's something that you won't see through the user interface, but it's a big change that I made, and that helps with all the state synchronization. Another change that I made, this was something that was asked for by a user, and that's the native capability of the SoundTouch speaker is if you're playing a preset and you turn the speaker off and you restart the speaker, it'll resume that preset. I had it so it always goes back to a vanilla Wi-Fi state because that's the way I like it. But now what I've done is I've added that as an option, and it now defaults to the way that user wanted it. So it's called the auto resume preset. So that's in your environment file. In fact, this is mine, so it's set default. So that's another feature that someone wanted. So I've added that. Two other really big technical feedbacks that I got was, number one, I had the restart of Music Assistant, and I was doing that where in your environment file, you had to put in the ID and password of your actual server, which obviously is not very secure. And I was, initially built this whole thing just for me, so I wasn't so worried about that. But one developer suggested I do that through something called Docker sockets. So I researched that a little bit. So that's now been fully implemented. So when you reset, if you notice, the env file has really changed. So now all I need is just the container name, and it will use the Docker socket to submit the reboot. Then another big change I made is, I'll bring it up here, is before my install process was, you got to copy down all the files and put them in the right directories and things like that. So now what I've done is gone to the GitHub image registry. So now you can see it's more like some of the other software you might download, like Music Assistant, where I just put the image here, and then your Docker Compose file just has, you set up your container name and where you want it to go. So now it brings down the whole image. You don't have to do all the cloning. the file structure or anything. It brings it all down and it creates a whole image. And so then ultimately all you end up having in your directory that's visible is your config files and some logs and your library, things like that. So hopefully that'll make the install process a lot cleaner. Then another thing is part of that install process. If you notice here on the logs, I start checking for the configuration. I had another user who, if you had done my configuration out of order, we had issues where we had, generic IP names sitting in the hybrid presets, and I had to give them a special version of one of the codes to clean that out. And now that actually is built in and auto corrects if it ever sees that. But in addition, I start checking on boot. I check to see that your configurations are correct. Also, another feature is I will automatically launch Music Assistant if it's not running. I check the versions, as I said before, of the SoundTouch Hybrid app. I also, with a lot of the changes I made to the back end, I also upgraded my Music Assistant, which I was still running on version 2.7. And it turns out they have a lot of great enhancements to the DLNA stream and some other things, and that obsoleted some of my API calls. So I've completely upgraded that. So now the minimum requirement is you need Music Assistant 2.8.5, and it will check for that and tell you, hey, it's out of date, you ought to upgrade. The cool thing about that is we're getting metadata on that stream, not just with AirPlay. One other thing that I did to also help for the config files, on your first install, and this is all in the README, it will actually create the templates for you for the speakers files, the YML file, your ENV file, and then just stop the app and wait for you to configure all of that. In my README, you'll be able to see you can reuse your old files. Obviously, for people who are using the app, they don't want to start their library over. And so you can just drop that in and drop in your speakers JSON. But the ENV file has really changed, and the YML file that you download from GitHub is changed. So that's the changes. Like I said, there's a bunch on the front end, the big ones being the custom URLs, streaming built into the library, the additional sorting and filtering, and then a lot of things that just hopefully make the install much more robust, and the version checking, and then the back end moving to this whole WebSockets model and upgrading how I talk to Music Assistant. So I just wanted to go over all of that. So check it out. And again, as always, if there's issues, you just create them on GitHub. I try to look at those and work with everyone to solve any issues and then take the solutions to those issues, like very much so I've done in version 3, and then incorporate them into the next release, the version 4. So yeah, that's it, version 3. Cool.